The creature stood in the center of the fighting arena. Its name was Vexthor, and it had never lost a battle. The alien was 8 feet tall with black armor covering its entire body. It had 4 arms, and each arm ended in sharp claws that could cut through metal. The creature belonged to a race called the Cathari, and they were born to hunt and fight. For 300 years, Vexthor had traveled from one world to another. It searched for the strongest warriors in the galaxy. Every planet had champions, fighters who were considered the best of their kind. Vexthor challenged them all. The creature fought warriors who could bend steel bars with their hands. It defeated sword fighters whose blades moved so fast they became invisible. It won against war leaders who had conquered entire planets. Each time Vexthor won, it took something from the defeated warrior. A weapon, a piece of armor, or something that showed their culture. The Cathari kept these items as proof of victory. Over the years, the collection grew larger and larger. But something was wrong. With each new victory, Vexthor felt less satisfied. The fights were becoming too easy. The warriors were becoming predictable. The thrill of the hunt was fading away. Then Vexthor heard stories about a new species. They called themselves humans, and they came from a planet named Earth. The Cathari studied all the information it could find about these humans. The reports were strange. Humans were small compared to most warrior races. They were slow. Their skin was soft and easy to damage. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They had no thick skin to protect them. Everything about humans suggested they were weak. But there was something interesting in the reports. Earth was what scientists called a death world. It was a planet where everything tried to kill everything else. There were huge predators with sharp teeth. There were tiny creatures that spread deadly diseases. The weather could kill with heat or cold. The ground shook and destroyed cities. The oceans could swallow entire coastlines. According to the reports, humans should have died out long ago. Any logical analysis said they were too weak to survive on such a dangerous world. Yet somehow they not only survived but became the dominant species on their planet. They built cities, developed technology, and eventually traveled to the stars. This did not make sense to Vexthor. How could such weak creatures overcome such terrible odds? The Cathari decided to find out. Vexthor traveled to a place called Kepler Station. It was a huge space habitat that orbited a giant gas planet in the outer region of controlled space. Many different species lived and worked on the station. Humans had recently established a military base there. If these creatures were as weak as they appeared, defeating their champion would be simple. If the stories about Earth held any truth, perhaps Vexthor would finally find a real challenge. When Vexthor arrived at the station, it followed the traditional method. The Cathari sent a message on all communication channels. The message was the same one it had sent 300 times before on 300 different worlds. The words were simple and direct. The message said that Vexthor was an undefeated hunter. It said the Cathari wanted to fight the strongest human warrior. If the human won, Vexthor would leave peacefully. If the human lost, Vexthor would take a trophy and move on to the next challenge. This was the way of the hunt, the tradition that the Cathari had followed for generations. The human military command responded quickly. They agreed to send someone to meet Vexthor. The meeting would happen in the station's main arena. This was a large space where people gathered for sports and important events. It was neutral ground where all species were equal under station law. Vexthor arrived at the arena early. The Cathari stood under the bright lights and looked up at the observation areas. Thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds filled the seats. They had come to watch the famous hunter face a new opponent. This was always Vexthor's favorite moment. The time before the battle when anything could happen. The feeling of not knowing what would come next. Then the human champion walked through the entrance on the other side of the arena. Vexthor felt disappointed immediately. The human was tiny, barely over 5.5 feet tall. She wore simple military clothes with no armor to protect her body. Her skin was pale, almost white. Her brown hair was pulled back and tied behind her head. She carried no visible weapons. The announcer said her name was Lieutenant Kate Bishop. She belonged to something called the Earth Expeditionary Force. This could not be their best warrior. Surely the humans had someone larger, stronger, more impressive. This small female looked like she would break if Vexthor breathed on her too hard. The Cathari felt a wave of disappointment wash over it. This would be over in seconds. Kate walked to the center of the arena. She stopped about 20 feet away from Vexthor and crossed her arms over her chest. Her face showed no fear. In fact, she looked almost bored. Kate spoke first. Her voice was clear and calm. She said she had heard about the famous Vexthor, 300 wins and 0 losses. She said it was an impressive record. Vexthor's translator device changed her words into sounds the Cathari could understand. The hunter responded, noting that the human did not seem worried. Most warriors showed at least some concern when facing Vexthor for the first time. This human showed nothing. Kate shrugged her shoulders. She asked if she should be concerned. She said Vexthor wanted a fight and apparently she was the one chosen to provide it. Then she asked about the rules. Would they fight until first blood? Until someone gave up? Until death? Vexthor explained the rules. They would fight until one of them could not continue. The Cathari did not want to kill the human. It only wanted to test her strength and skill. This was about honor, not murder. Kate asked about weapons. What was allowed? Vexthor told her she could use whatever she wanted. The Cathari needed nothing except what nature had provided. The hunter extended all 4 arms and spread its razor-sharp claws. The lights in the arena reflected off the black surfaces, making them gleam like polished blades. Kate looked at the claws for a moment. Then she bent down and started untying her boots. She pulled them off and stood barefoot on the arena floor. Her feet were small and looked very vulnerable. She left her boots on the ground beside her. She looked up at Vexthor and smiled. She said she was ready. She told the hunter they should start. The words were simple, but something in her tone made Vexthor pause. The human was not acting like prey. She was not showing fear or even caution. She was treating this like a game, something fun rather than dangerous. This was unusual. But Vexthor had waited long enough. The Cathari lowered its body into an attack position. 4 arms spread wide, claws extended, muscles coiled and ready to strike. The hunter had used this same opening move 300 times. It had never failed. Vexthor charged forward. The Cathari crossed the distance in 3 massive leaps. 4 arms swept toward Kate in a pattern that left no escape. The upper arms came from the sides while the lower arms struck from different angles. This attack had defeated champions who were twice Kate's size. It would crush this small human in an instant. The claws sliced through the air where Kate had been standing. But Kate was not there anymore. Kate had moved before Vexthor finished the charge. She stepped inside the arc of the attack with smooth, practiced movements. The hunter's claws whistled through empty air as the human ducked under the upper arms. She twisted her body and slipped around the lower arms like water flowing around rocks. Before Vexthor could adjust, Kate's elbow struck hard against the joint of one of the lower arms. Pain shot through the Cathari's arm. It was not serious damage, but it was unexpected. The hunter spun around, moving faster than something so large should be able to move. But again, Kate had already moved to a different position. She was dancing around Vexthor's attacks. She seemed to know where each strike would go before it happened. She stayed just out of reach while landing quick, precise hits on vulnerable spots. The crowd in the observation areas had gone completely silent. This was not how these fights usually went. Normally, the champion would try to match Vexthor's strength. They would block the attacks or counter with their own powerful strikes. But Kate was not fighting like a warrior. She was fighting like something else entirely. Vexthor began to change its approach. The human was fast and skilled, that was clear now. But she was still small and light. One solid hit would end this fight immediately. The hunter just needed to connect once, just once. The Cathari made a fake attack with the upper arms. Kate moved to dodge them, exactly as Vexthor expected. But the real attack came from below. The lower arms swept at Kate's legs, trying to knock her off balance. If she fell, the fight would be over. Kate jumped straight up. The sweep passed underneath her feet, missing by inches. While she was in the air, she twisted her body and landed on Vexthor's extended arm. She used it like a stepping stone and jumped again, this time landing on the Cathari's back. Her legs wrapped around the hunter's torso. Her arm went around its throat. Vexthor tried to reach back and grab the human. But Kate's position was perfect. All 4 of the Cathari's arms could not get the right angle to pull her off. The pressure on the hunter's throat increased. Not enough to cause real damage, but enough to make breathing difficult. The Cathari stumbled forward, trying to shake Kate loose. The human held on tightly. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small. Vexthor spun in a circle, then made a decision. The hunter threw itself backward, using its own body weight to crush Kate against the arena floor. The impact was enormous. 800 pounds of HFY warrior slammed into the ground with Kate trapped underneath. The sound echoed through the arena. Several beings in the crowd looked away, thinking the small human must have been killed or at least badly injured. Kate released her hold and rolled away. She came up in a crouch about 10 feet from Vexthor. The hunter got to its feet quickly, expecting to see broken bones or hear the gasping sounds of damaged lungs. But Kate was fine. She was breathing normally. She did not appear to be hurt at all. In fact, she was smiling again. She said that was a nice try. She commented that Vexthor was heavier than it looked. For the first time in 300 battles, Vexthor felt something it had not felt before. Not fear, not yet. But respect. Real respect. This human had genuine skills. She had been trained well and had experience that went far beyond what the HFY had expected. She was not just lucky. She was good. They began to circle each other. Vexthor studied Kate's movements carefully. The hunter looked for patterns, for weaknesses, for any small mistake that could be exploited. Kate's breathing was steady and controlled. Her stance was relaxed but ready to move in any direction. Her eyes never left the HFY's central body. She was not trying to watch all 4 arms at once. Instead, she was tracking where Vexthor's weight shifted. Smart. Vexthor spoke. The hunter said Kate fought well. Better than anticipated. This was true. The HFY had expected an easy victory. Instead, it had found a real opponent. Kate thanked the hunter. She said Vexthor was not bad either. Then she tilted her head slightly and asked a question. Had Vexthor ever fought a persistence hunter before? The HFY did not understand what she meant. The translator gave the words, but the concept was unclear. What was a persistence hunter? Kate explained. She said that was what humans were. Back on Earth, before humans had weapons or technology, they hunted by chasing prey until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Humans were not the fastest animals on their planet. They were not the strongest. But they did not stop. They did not quit. They could keep going long after everything else had given up and died. The human continued. She said a human could chase an antelope for hours under the hot sun. The antelope was much faster, so it would run away easily at first. But eventually the antelope would need to stop and rest. When it did, the human would appear again. The antelope would run away again. This cycle would repeat over and over. Eventually the antelope would be too tired to run anymore. Then the human would make the kill. Vexthor considered this information. The concept was completely alien to HFY combat philosophy. The HFY valued overwhelming force and quick, decisive action. A battle was meant to be fast, brutal, and definitive. The idea of simply outlasting an opponent seemed primitive and inefficient. It did not sound like a proper hunting technique at all. The hunter asked if Kate believed she could outlast Vexthor. Did she really think she could keep fighting until the HFY collapsed? Kate said she knew she could. Her voice was confident but not arrogant. She was simply stating a fact. Then she gestured at the arena around them. She said she did not actually want to fight Vexthor for the next 6 hours until the hunter collapsed from exhaustion. That seemed inefficient for both of them. It would be boring for the crowd, too. Vexthor asked what she proposed instead. If she did not want to continue the fight, what did she want? Kate suggested a different kind of challenge. One that actually tested what Vexthor was really looking for. She pointed out that the hunter traveled around fighting the best warriors from different species. It collected trophies from defeated opponents. But what was the point? What was Vexthor actually searching for? The HFY started to answer, but Kate continued talking. She said Vexthor was not learning anything new from these fights. The hunter already knew it could win in single combat. The fights were getting boring because Vexthor had mastered that particular skill. What the hunter was actually searching for was not another fight. It was something new. Something that would challenge Vexthor in ways it had not experienced before. The words hit Vexthor like a physical blow. The human was right. The emptiness after each victory. The growing sense that the hunt had lost its meaning. The constant disappointment with each new opponent. These were all symptoms of exactly what Kate described. The HFY had been avoiding this truth for years. Vexthor stood very still. The hunter's 4 arms hung at its sides. The HFY asked quietly what Kate suggested. What kind of challenge could replace the traditional combat? Kate walked to the edge of the arena. She picked up a small electronic device that had been left on a bench. She held it up so Vexthor could see the screen. The device showed information and images. Kate explained that there was a situation developing in a region of space called the Kryn sector. A mining colony on a planet called New Haven had gone silent. No communications for 72 hours. The company that owned the mine had sent a security team to investigate what happened. The security team found something strange. The entire colony was empty. 230 people were missing. Not dead, missing. There were no bodies. There were no signs of fighting or struggle. The buildings were intact. The equipment was still running. The people had simply vanished. 3 days after the security team arrived at the colony, they went silent too. Now the company was offering a large reward for anyone who could figure out what happened and bring those people back safely. Vexthor looked at the information on the screen. The hunter pointed out that this was a mystery, not a battle. How was this a challenge in the way the Cathari understood challenges? Kate corrected the hunter. She said it was a hunt, just a different kind than Vexthor was used to. Whatever took those people was smart, organized, and effective. It was clearly a predator of some kind, and Vexthor was a hunter who was looking for a real challenge. Then Kate made her proposal. She suggested they work together to solve this mystery. If they found whatever was responsible and Kate proved more capable than Vexthor in tracking and dealing with it, the hunter would have to acknowledge humans as worthy opponents. If Vexthor proved more capable than Kate, the hunter would get its victory. Kate would personally create a trophy for Vexthor using metals from Earth. The Cathari's mind raced through many possibilities. This was completely unprecedented. No warrior had ever proposed anything like this before. And yet, something about the idea called to Vexthor on a level deeper than simple combat. A real hunt, an unknown predator, a mystery that required more than just strength and speed. Vexthor asked what would happen if they were equals in this task. What if neither one proved more capable than the other? Kate smiled at the question. She said that maybe then Vexthor should stop collecting trophies and start collecting allies instead. The galaxy was a big place. There were probably many interesting hunts out there that would be more fun with a partner than alone. The Cathari extended one of its upper arms toward Kate. The palm was open in a Cathari gesture. That meant acceptance of terms. Vexthor said it agreed. They would hunt together. They would solve this mystery as a team. Kate reached up and clasped the Cathari's massive hand with her own much smaller one. They shook on the agreement. The crowd in the observation areas erupted in confused chatter. People had come to watch a fight. Instead, they had witnessed something completely different. This was not how these challenges were supposed to end. 2 days later, Kate and Vexthor arrived at New Haven. They traveled in a small transport ship that Kate had requisitioned from the human military. The planet was unremarkable from space. It was rocky with a thin atmosphere. The surface was barely suitable for human habitation, but the ground was rich in valuable minerals. That was why the mining company had established a colony there. The colony consisted of prefabricated buildings clustered around the main mining operation. As their ship descended toward the landing pad, Vexthor studied the sensor readings carefully. The power was still on throughout the colony. The environmental systems were functioning normally. The life support was operational. Whatever had happened here, it was not a catastrophic failure of equipment. Kate agreed. She said that was what made the situation so strange. There were no distress signals on record. There were no signs that anyone had tried to evacuate. There was no indication that people had attempted to leave the planet. They had just vanished. The ship touched down on the landing pad. Kate and Vexthor disembarked and looked around. The colony was eerie in its complete normalcy. Lights were on in all the buildings. Equipment hummed with electrical power. Everything looked like people might return at any moment. But there was no one. They walked to the nearest building. It was the cafeteria where the miners ate their meals. Inside, they found a half-eaten meal sitting on one of the tables. The food had gone bad, but it was clear that someone had been in the middle of eating when something happened. They had just stood up and walked away, leaving everything behind. Vexthor's predatory instincts immediately went on high alert. This was wrong. When predators took prey, they left signs. There were usually bodies or blood. There were territorial markers or tracks. There was always some indication of what had happened. But this scene suggested something far more disturbing. This suggested intelligent planning and precise execution. The Cathari suggested they split up to cover more ground. They could search the buildings faster if they worked separately. Vexthor could check one side of the colony while Kate checked the other. Kate immediately said no. She said that was absolutely not going to happen. She explained that was how people died in what humans called horror movies. Those were a type of entertainment on Earth. The plot usually involved people investigating something creepy. Someone would suggest splitting up. Then everyone would get picked off one by whatever monster was lurking around. She said they would stick together, check every building systematically, and maintain constant communication. Vexthor found this logic sound, even if the reference to movies was confusing. They began their systematic search. They started with the residential quarters where the miners had lived. Each living unit told the same story. Recent occupation, sudden absence, no signs of violence or struggle. Personal belongings were still in place. Beds were unmade. Clothes were hanging in closets. It was in the medical facility that they found the first real clue. Kate noticed it first. There were subtle scratches on the floor leading toward a supply closet. The marks were fresh. They had been made recently by something heavy being dragged across the floor. Vexthor opened the supply closet carefully. The hunter was ready for an attack, but nothing came. Inside, they found medical supplies scattered on the floor. Behind the supplies, there was a hidden panel in the wall. The panel had been pried open from the inside. It led to an access tunnel that was part of the colony's maintenance system. Kate shined her light into the dark tunnel. She said someone had been trying to hide, or maybe trying to escape from something. They entered the maintenance tunnels. The passages were narrow, which was difficult for Vexthor. The Cathari had to hunch down and fold its forearms close to its body to fit. The hunter's natural night vision was superior to human eyes. But Kate's tactical light illuminated small details that even Vexthor might have missed in the darkness. The tunnel system was extensive. It ran beneath the entire colony like a network of veins. As they moved deeper underground, Kate's handheld scanner began picking up strange readings. She stopped and looked at the device's screen. She whispered that there was something down here. The scanner was detecting biological signs, but they were weird. The computer could not identify what species the readings belonged to. The readings did not match anything in the Galactic database. Vexthor's combat instincts flared to full alertness. The hunter asked how many life signs there were. Kate said there were at least 30, maybe more. The signals were clustered together about 100 meters ahead of their current position. She checked her rifle to make sure it was ready to fire. Then she added something that made Vexthor tense. Whatever these creatures were, they were between the humans and the main power junction for the entire colony. They proceeded forward cautiously. Every step was careful and quiet. Both of them were ready for an attack. The tunnel gradually opened into a larger chamber. It appeared to be a central hub where multiple maintenance tunnels connected. And there, illuminated by the glow of their lights, they finally saw what had taken the colonists. The creatures were unlike anything in the known galactic databases. Vexthor had traveled to 17 star systems and seen hundreds of different species, but these things were completely new. Each creature was roughly humanoid in basic shape. They had a head, a torso, and 4 limbs, but that was where the similarity to any known species ended. The creatures were covered in a crystalline carapace that looked like living glass. The surfaces refracted light in strange and unsettling ways. They moved with jerky insectoid motions that seemed unnatural. Their faces, if they could be called faces, had no discernible features. There were no eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just a series of small holes that might have been sensory organs of some kind. The creatures were standing guard over something in the center of the chamber. Kate and Vexthor looked past the creatures and saw what they were protecting. The colonists. All 230 of them were there, plus the security team that had come to investigate. They were wrapped in some kind of organic webbing that covered their entire bodies. Only their faces were visible. They appeared to be unconscious but alive. The crystalline creatures reacted instantly to Kate and Vexthor's presence. Their movements were coordinated with mechanical precision. It was clear they operated as a group rather than as individuals. Half of the creatures immediately formed a protective barrier around the webbed colonists. The other half advanced toward the intruders with slow, deliberate steps. Kate spoke in a tense but controlled voice. She said they needed to rescue those people, but they also needed to understand what they were dealing with first. Charging in blindly would be stupid. Every instinct Vexthor had screamed to attack immediately. These creatures had taken prey. They had claimed territory. The Cathari way was to strike fast and decisively, show dominance, eliminate the threat, take back what was taken. But Kate's words from their first meeting echoed in the hunter's mind. Humans were persistence hunters. They thought long-term. They planned. Vexthor asked what Kate proposed. The hunter's voice was strained. Fighting against the instinct to attack was physically difficult. Kate was already backing away slowly. She motioned for Vexthor to do the same. She said they needed to retreat. They would regroup on the surface. They would figure out what these things were and what they wanted. Then they would come back with a proper plan. Every fiber of Vexthor's being resisted this idea. Warriors did not retreat. Hunters did not back down from prey. The Cathari were taught from birth that showing weakness led to death. And yet, looking at the organized defense of the creatures, seeing their clear intelligence and coordination, the hunter realized Kate was right. This was not a simple hunt. This required strategy and careful thinking. They withdrew back through the tunnels. The crystalline creatures did not pursue them beyond the chamber. This was interesting. If the creatures were purely aggressive predators, they would have chased. But they stayed to guard their captives instead. This suggested they had specific goals and priorities. Once back on the surface in the colony buildings, Kate immediately set up her scanning equipment. She began analyzing all the data they had gathered. She connected her devices to the colony's computer system to access any stored information. Kate studied the readings on her screens for a long time. Then she made a sound of understanding. She said the creatures were silicon-based life forms. That explained why the scanners could not identify them. Most galactic databases only included carbon-based life. Silicon-based life was extremely rare and mostly theoretical. These things had evolved in conditions completely different from normal life. Vexthor looked at the data over Kate's shoulder. The hunter said the mining operation must have broken into their habitat. The creatures came up through the tunnels to investigate what was happening to their home. Kate nodded and pulled up more information. She said when the creatures found the colonists, they did exactly what any intelligent species would do when encountering unknown entities in their territory. They neutralized the threat and contained it for study. She pointed at the biological scan data from the webbed colonists. The webbing was not hurting them. In fact, it was providing nutrients and maintaining their vital signs. The creatures were not killing the colonists. They were preserving them and keeping them alive. This revelation completely changed everything. Vexthor had assumed they were dealing with a predator taking prey. The Cathari understood predators. But Kate's analysis suggested something entirely different. They were dealing with a territorial species that was protecting its home from invaders. Vexthor spoke slowly, processing this new understanding. The hunter said that meant they were the invaders. The humans had come to this planet and started drilling into the ground without knowing what lived down there. Kate sat back in her chair and confirmed this. She said technically, yes, the humans were the invaders. The mining company had never done a deep geological survey of the planet. They did not know there was intelligent life living deep underground. They just saw valuable minerals and started extracting them. She explained they now had a few options. They could fight their way into the underground chamber and try to free the colonists by force. But those creatures were clearly organized and worked as a coordinated unit. Kate and Vexthor would be outnumbered at least 15-1. People would die. Human colonists would die. The silicon-based natives would die. It would be a massacre that benefited no one. Vexthor asked what the alternative was. If fighting was not a good option, what could they do? Kate said they should try communication. If the creatures were intelligent enough to coordinate defense and preserve captives without harming them, they were intelligent enough to negotiate. She started setting up different equipment. She said she would try to establish a dialogue using basic mathematical principles. It was a long shot. There was no guarantee it would work. But it was better than starting a war with an unknown species. Vexthor watched Kate work. The hunter was fascinated by her approach. The Cathari had spent 300 years seeking worthy opponents in combat. It had never occurred to Vexthor that worthiness could be measured in different ways. Patience, creativity, the willingness to choose understanding over violence. These were not traditional Cathari values, but they were clearly effective. For 6 hours, Kate worked on establishing communication. She used light patterns projected down into the tunnels. She used mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should recognize. She used basic physics demonstrations to show cause and effect. Vexthor helped with the process. The hunter used its forearms to manipulate multiple interface devices simultaneously. The Cathari's pattern recognition abilities, which had been honed through countless battles, proved useful in identifying the mathematical language the silicon-based creatures might understand. Finally, they received a response. A series of light pulses came from the maintenance tunnel entrance. The pattern was basic and crude, but it was unmistakably intentional communication. Someone or something down there was trying to talk back. Kate grinned widely. She said they had gotten their attention. Now the real work would begin. Over the next several hours, a dialogue slowly developed. The silicon-based species, which Kate started calling the Crystallians for convenience, communicated through patterns of light and vibration. The process was slow and frustrating. Both sides had to learn how to express complex ideas through simple symbols. But gradually understanding emerged. The Crystallians confirmed Kate's theory. They were an ancient species that had lived deep underground for millions of years. They existed in the high-pressure, high-temperature zones near the planet's molten core. The mining operation had punctured their habitat. Toxic gases from the surface atmosphere had flooded into their home. For the Crystallians, the surface air was poison. The colonists had been taken not out of aggression but as leverage and protection. The Crystallians were trying to prevent further mining, while also ensuring the surface dwellers could not simply seal the tunnels and trap the underground species forever. They were holding hostages to force a negotiation. Vexthor observed that it was essentially a hostage situation, but one born of desperation rather than malice. The Crystallians were not evil. They were scared and trying to protect their species from extinction. Kate agreed completely. She said that was exactly right. Then she explained what they were going to do next. She outlined a plan that Vexthor thought was either brilliant or completely insane. They would negotiate a treaty between the Crystallians and the mining company. The company would relocate the colony to a different part of the planet. They would change their mining operations to avoid the Crystallian habitat completely. In exchange, the Crystallians would release all the colonists unharmed. Both species would agree to future communication protocols to prevent similar incidents. The difficult part would be getting the mining company to agree to these terms. Large corporations were not known for caring about anything except profit. Kate spent 2 full days on subspace communications, arguing with corporate executives who only cared about their bottom line. She used every argument she could think of. She pointed out the potential for unique trade opportunities with the silicon-based species. She mentioned the bad publicity that would come from starting a war with intelligent natives. She explained the legal liability if word got out that they had endangered colonists through negligence. She even tried appealing to basic morality and ethics. Nothing worked. The executives kept saying that relocating the colony would be too expensive. They said the mineral deposits in the current location were too valuable. They said shareholders would not accept the reduced profits. They made excuse after excuse. Kate was getting visibly frustrated. Her jaw was tight and her voice was strained. Vexthor could see she was close to losing her temper. During one particularly frustrating call with a senior executive, the hunter made a decision. Vexthor stepped into the video frame so the executive could see the Cathari warrior standing beside Kate. Vexthor spoke in its deep, resonant voice. The hunter identified itself as an undefeated warrior of the 17 systems. It said it had traveled across the galaxy seeking worthy challenges. Then Vexthor made a statement that surprised even Kate. The Cathari said the Crystallian people were worth 100 of the company's mining operations. If the executives did not agree to Kate's terms immediately, Vexthor would make it a personal mission to ensure every warrior species in known space learned of their cowardice and dishonor. The hunter said it would use its reputation and connections to disrupt the company's operations at every turn. Other warrior species would join in. The company would find it impossible to do business anywhere in civilized space. The executive's face went visibly pale. The reputation of the Cathari was well known throughout the galaxy. Vexthor specifically was famous, or perhaps infamous. Having such a warrior as an active enemy would be absolutely disastrous for business. No amount of profit was worth that kind of trouble. The executive's voice shook slightly as he spoke. He said the company would comply with all the treaty terms. They would relocate the colony. They would avoid the crystalline habitat. They would establish proper communication protocols. Whatever Kate and Vexthor wanted, they would do it. After the call ended, Kate turned to Vexthor with a raised eyebrow. She said that had been very heroic. Her tone suggested she was impressed but also slightly amused. Vexthor said it was simply strategic. Using reputation as leverage was a logical tactic, but the hunter could not quite suppress what might have been, in Cathari terms, the equivalent of a smile. The truth was that Vexthor had meant every word. The Crystallians deserved protection, they deserved respect, and the mining company deserved to be threatened into doing the right thing. The formal exchange took place 3 days later. The mining company sent engineering teams to the planet. They properly sealed the breach in the crystalline habitat. They established a secure buffer zone between the mining operations and the underground territory. They set up communication equipment that both species could use. Kate and Vexthor returned to the underground chamber. This time they brought a team of translators and diplomats with them. The proper authorities needed to witness the exchange and formalize the treaty. The Crystallians released the colonists exactly as promised. The organic webbing dissolved harmlessly. It simply turned to dust and fell away. The 230 miners woke up confused but completely unharmed. They had no memory of being captured. The last thing they remembered was going about their normal work. Then they woke up surrounded by strange crystalline creatures and rescue teams. The security team was returned as well. They looked sheepish and embarrassed at having been captured so easily. But they were alive and healthy, which was what mattered. As the colonists were being evacuated to the surface and prepared for transport off the planet, Kate and Vexthor remained in the chamber with the Crystallian representatives. Through their newly established light-based language, the silicon-based species expressed gratitude for the peaceful resolution. They had expected violence. Instead, they had found understanding. One of the Crystallians, apparently a leader or elder based on its larger size and more complex light patterns, approached Kate slowly. It extended one of its crystalline limbs and offered something. It was a small crystalline formation that glowed with internal light. Through the translator device, the meaning was clear. This was a gift, a token of respect and alliance between species. Kate accepted the crystal with appropriate ceremony. She held it carefully and thanked the Crystallian leader. Then the creature turned to Vexthor and offered a second crystal. This one was larger and had a different color spectrum. The light inside it pulsed in beautiful patterns. Vexthor took the crystal carefully in one of its upper hands. The crystal was warm to the touch. It pulsed gently with light that seemed to match the hunter's heartbeat. The Cathari realized this was not just a gift. It was recognition. The Crystallians were acknowledging Vexthor as a protector rather than a threat, as someone who had helped rather than harmed. After all the diplomatic formalities were complete and the officials had documented everything, Kate and Vexthor returned to the surface. They stood together on the landing pad and watched as the evacuation ships departed. The rescued colonists were being taken to a medical station for examination. The mining company was already beginning the process of relocating their operations. Vexthor looked at the glowing crystal in its hand. Then the hunter looked at Kate standing beside it. The Cathari spoke quietly. It said it had been defeated. Kate looked surprised by this statement. She said they had worked together on this mission. There had been no competition. Nobody had won or lost anything. Vexthor said that was precisely why it had been defeated. The hunter set down its equipment. Then, in a gesture that would have shocked anyone from its own species, the Cathari lowered itself to one knee before Kate. It was a position of submission and respect that no Cathari warrior had, shown to another being in recorded history. The hunter spoke from the kneeling position. It said that for 300 years it had sought strength through conquest. It had measured worth by counting how many warriors it could overcome. It had collected trophies as proof of dominance. The Cathari had believed that being the strongest was the most important thing in the universe. Vexthor held up the glowing crystal from the Crystallians. It said this was the first trophy it had ever received that was given freely. Every other trophy had been taken from defeated opponents, but this one came from gratitude and respect rather than from conquest. That difference changed everything. The hunter continued speaking. It said Kate had shown Vexthor that true strength was not in the ability to defeat others. True strength was in the wisdom to know when not to fight. It was in the patience to understand before acting. It was in the courage to choose a harder path because it was the right path, even when violence would be easier. Vexthor looked up at Kate with all four of its eyes. It said it was kneeling not in submission, but in recognition. Kate was not just a worthy warrior. She was something the hunter had never known existed. She was a worthy teacher. If Kate would accept, Vexthor wanted to learn more of this human way of thinking. Kate was quiet for a long moment. She seemed to be thinking carefully about what to say. Then she knelt down to Vexthor's level so they were face to face. Her voice was firm but kind when she spoke. She said Vexthor needed to stand up. She explained that humans did not do that kneeling thing. On Earth, when someone offered to teach and someone else wanted to learn, nobody knelt to anyone. Instead, they stood beside each other as equals and worked together. That was how humans operated. Nobody was above or below anyone else. They were all just people trying to figure things out. Kate stood up and offered her hand to help Vexthor rise. The hunter took the hand and stood. The height difference between them was enormous, but somehow they felt equal. Kate continued speaking. She said Vexthor had plenty to teach her as well. She had seen the hunter's pattern recognition skills when they were setting up the mathematical communication with the Crystallians. She had observed Vexthor's ability to think tactically in the underground chamber. Those abilities were impressive and valuable. This did not have to be a simple teacher-student relationship. It could be a partnership where both of them learned from each other. Vexthor repeated the word slowly. Partnership. In Cathari culture, such a thing was extremely rare. Warriors competed against each other. They did not collaborate. They did not share knowledge or work together. But then, Vexthor was no longer just a simple warrior following old traditions. Kate explained that the galaxy was full of situations like the one they had just resolved. There were conflicts everywhere that could be solved without violence if someone took the time to understand what was really happening. The Earth Expeditionary Force could use someone with Vexthor's skills and reputation. She added with a slight smile that some diplomatic missions could really benefit from having a giant four-armed predator standing in the background looking intimidating while she tried to negotiate treaties. Vexthor's translator device struggled to properly convey the sound the Cathari made in response, but Kate recognized it as laughter. The hunter agreed that its intimidation skills could definitely be useful in certain situations. They walked back to their transport ship together. As they prepared the ship for departure, Vexthor looked at the collection of trophies it had brought along. 300 items from 300 defeated warriors. Weapons and armor pieces from across 17 star systems. The items suddenly seemed small and meaningless. They were just objects. They represented nothing of real value. The hunter asked Kate what it should do with all these trophies. Should Vexthor just throw them away? Kate thought about the question for a moment. Then she suggested sending them back. Vexthor should track down the warriors or their descendants and return the items. Each return should include a personal message. The message should tell them that Vexthor had found something more valuable than trophies. The hunter had found real purpose. Over the following months, that was exactly what Vexthor did. Each trophy was carefully packaged and returned to its original owner or their family. Each package included a personal message explaining what had changed. Many of the warriors who received their items back were confused. Some were angry. They thought Vexthor was insulting them by returning the trophies. But several warriors reached out with curiosity. They wanted to know what could have possibly changed the infamous hunter's perspective so dramatically. Vexthor told them all the same story. The hunter spoke about Kate Bishop and the humans. It described a species that had climbed to the top of their food chain not through superior strength or speed, but through persistence, adaptability, and willingness to cooperate. It explained how humanity had looked at a hostile universe and decided to make friends with it, rather than try to conquer it. Some warriors dismissed this as weakness. They said Vexthor had gone soft. They said the Cathari had betrayed its own nature, but others listened carefully. These were warriors who, like Vexthor, had begun to feel the emptiness that came from endless conflict. They were tired of fighting. They wanted something more meaningful. A few of them even sought out the human expeditionary force and offered their services, just as Kate had suggested they might. The partnership between Kate and Vexthor became somewhat legendary across the 17 systems. They handled difficult first contact situations. They negotiated treaties between hostile species. They resolved conflicts that other diplomats thought were impossible. The human and the Cathari became known as an unlikely pair that proved cooperation could be more powerful than conquest. One evening, several months after the incident on New Haven, they sat together after successfully mediating another dispute. This one had involved mining corporations and indigenous species on a different frontier world. The situation had been remarkably similar to the Crystallian case. But this time Kate and Vexthor had known exactly what to do. They had resolved the conflict in just 3 days. They sat watching the local star set over an alien landscape. The sky was purple instead of blue, and there were 2 moons rising on the horizon. But the moment of peaceful rest felt universal. Vexthor spoke thoughtfully. The hunter said it had been thinking about something Kate had said during their first meeting. She had asked if Vexthor had ever fought a persistence hunter. She had explained that humans did not stop, did not quit, and kept going long after everything else had given up. Kate said she remembered that conversation. Vexthor said it finally understood what persistence really meant. It was not just about physical endurance. It was about persisting in all things. Persisting in the belief that problems could be solved. Persisting in the attempt to understand others. Persisting in the choice to build rather than destroy, even when destruction would be much easier and faster. Kate smiled and agreed. She said that was exactly right. Humans were too stubborn to accept that some things could not be fixed. They kept trying until they found a way. Vexthor said it was a formidable trait, more dangerous than any weapon, more powerful than any warrior, because while strength could be overcome and speed could be matched, persistence could not be defeated. It simply continued until it found a way forward. The Cathari looked at the 2 crystals it now carried. One from the Crystallians and one that Kate had given as a partnership gift. These were worth more than 300 trophies taken in combat. Vexthor said it was grateful that persistence had brought Kate to that arena on Kepler Station, and grateful that it had convinced the human to offer an alternative to their scheduled fight. Kate laughed and admitted something. She said she had actually been terrified when Vexthor charged at her in the arena. The hunter was really fast for something so large and heavily armored. Vexthor said Kate had hidden the fear very well. The hunter had thought the human was completely calm and unafraid. Kate explained that was another human trait. Humans were really good at bluffing and hiding their true feelings when necessary. They sat in comfortable silence as more stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow they would file their report with the authorities and move on to their next assignment. There were always more conflicts to resolve. There were always more species that needed help. There were always more opportunities to prove that cooperation was stronger than conquest. And if anyone asked Vexthor about its famous 300 victories, the Cathari would tell them an important truth. The greatest victory was not in defeating Kate Bishop in combat. The greatest victory was in being defeated by her philosophy and way of thinking. In learning that there were far more important things in the universe than being the strongest warrior in the galaxy. There was more value in being a protector than a predator. More meaning in being a builder than a destroyer. More honor in kneeling before someone in recognition of their wisdom than in standing over defeated opponents and taking their possessions as trophies. The hunter had traveled across the galaxy seeking a worthy opponent to test its strength. Instead, Vexthor had found something far more valuable. A worthy partner, a new purpose, and a glimpse of what the future could become when different species chose to work together, rather than fight against each other for dominance and resources.